We are at a very critical juncture of Indian politics. Prime Minister Narendra Modi led NDA is about to stake claim for for the third government, and this time the elections results were not expected. In fact, most of the exit polls had predicted an thumping majority for the BJP and the NDA government. But as it turned out, BJP finished below 250 seats. And the only psephologist who got it right was Yogendra Yadav. Yogendra Yadav had predicted that BJP will finish at below 250 seats. We are today talking to Mr. Yogendra Yadav, who is not just a renowned psephologist, but also the convener of Bharat Jodo Abhiyaan. Welcome, Yogendra Yadav ji. Yadav ji,
May
welcome.
I begin by saying that it's a health warning I always issue. I'm not a psephologist. I used to be one. And what I did was my duty as a political activist. I'm a political worker. Bharat Jodo Abhiyaan is not a neutral, non-partisan body. We have taken side with the constitution, and our movement had decided to oppose the BJP this time. And all I did was, in my capacity as a political worker, I just tried to puncture a completely false narrative that was being put out before the country. That I happened to get the range almost exactly right is a bit of a fluke that happens. I think undue credit has been given to me for that.
My first question to you is, we know that NDA is about to stake claim for the government, but we also know that NDA is depending, BJP to be precise, is depending on its allies. How do you see this panning out this time for the Modi 3.0?
That's a very critical difference that you have pointed out. Mr. Modi's victory of 2014 was a clear majority for BJP, a clear majority secured after 3 decades by one political party, and therefore it was an extraordinary mandate. His mandate of 2019 was an improvement upon that, where he crossed 300, his party on its own. So clearly, from there, coming down to where they have come is a moral defeat for the BJP. It's a political defeat for the BJP. And it's a personal defeat for Mr. Modi, who would have no doubt got all the personal credit in case the BJP had repeated or improved upon its performance. They would have, they clearly are staking the claims to government. And I can see in terms of constitutional propriety, they have the first right to stake claim. And if they can cobble up numbers, yes, they would form the government as well. I'm more interested in the character of the government rather than the fact of government. And I believe it would be a government without the Iqbal of the government. Now, what is Iqbal? A government does not rule simply because it has constitutional powers. A government does not rule simply because it has coercive powers. Of course, they have army, they have bureaucracy, they have money. In the last instance, government rules because people believe that they are the right people to rule. There is a certain moral acceptance. There is a certain bolbala, hegemony. The word hegemony, as used by Antonio Gramsci, which is power plus legitimacy. That is Iqbal. To my mind, BJP, of course, may have the government if they are able to cobble up numbers. But it is a government without the Iqbal with which they have governed for 10 years. And that makes all the difference to my mind. And that would mean we are looking at a very different kind of regime. We are looking at a very different kind of polity. The few things that I can see is number one, I expect this our polity to be more to see much greater contestation than we have witnessed in the last 10 years. Occasionally, yes, the government lost in state elections, but on ground and in parliament, we saw very little contestation happening. Our democracy would be more serious and deeply contestatory than it was earlier, which is to say, I expect the parliament to have more debates. I expect the opposition to be heard, opposition to be louder than they were. I expect the media to become a little more vocal. I must say, mainstream media, barring some honorable exception, has been utterly shameful. The conduct of mainstream media. I'm conscious of the fact that I'm speaking to one of those mainstream media houses. But how can I not say what is the truth, what everyone knows, and every journalist tells me once the cameras are off? It's been a shameful period for Indian media. And I do believe that this verdict will give them the voice that they had lost for nearly 10 years in the country. I also hope that the judiciary, which has interpreted the constitution and law in a rather narrow and somewhat one sided manner, would begin to understand the letter and spirit of the constitution a little better than they have been able to do in the last few years. And finally, my hope is that movements, protests, resistance will get strong. And that is indeed a very, very good news for democracy because that contestation is the heart of democracy. And if movements get stronger, which means real life issues become more visible, that's good news for democracy. So, all in all, I expect this to become this verdict to usher in a more democratic India than the one that we had witnessed in the last few years. I had begun to describe India as a competitive authoritarianism, a place which is brought a regime which is basically authoritarian regime. However, some electoral competition is still allowed. We may, I hope, be able to retrace our steps a bit after this verdict. And in that context, I find two things particularly positive in this verdict. Number one, this verdict has reaffirmed the integrity of the polling and counting process. I would not say the electoral process as a whole, because the conduct of election commission has been utterly disgraceful. But the counting and the voting process the integrity has been restored, which is a very good thing for our democracy. And two, BJP getting some votes in South India is actually good news for our democracy because otherwise we were moving towards a situation of north-south polarization. That is not happening, and that's good news.
Okay, you rightly pointed out how BJP is, kind of making inroads in south of India, and we have a first BJP MP from Kerala, Mr. Gopi. So my next question would be again on this government formation. We have, almost a government where BJP is has fallen short of the majority mark and is relying on its allies. I would like to name these two important allies in this government: the JDU and the TDP, led by Chandrababu Naidu. So how do you see, for now we can have the government formation, but isn't there some kind of instability or uncertainty in the government? As far as we know, the past of these allies, they have switched sides, between both the factions.
The idea that coalition governments are inherently unstable is something that I don't quite buy if you look at the record of governments. Do remember, Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee ran a coalition government for 5 years, which had 23 partners at one point. So I think that this is BJP's narrative that, oh my God, anything coalitional is actually unstable. No. Coalitional arrangements are very much in the nature of our society and our polity. There's nothing very weird about it. There's nothing to be feared about them. Yes, what is to be feared is that from BJP's point of view, they would not have, they would not be able to just streamroll their way, that there is a significant South India partner, and that there is a significant partner, JDU, which ideologically at least is not aligned with BJP's anti-Muslim rhetoric. These are two very good checks. So I would personally think that in the background of a regime which was marching towards authoritarian regime, a regime which was unchecked, a regime which the democratic institutions and even courts were unable to check, that regime now has an inbuilt brakes in it. Any Democrat should simply applaud it. Some bit of checks and balances is what makes for a great democracy. So I would urge you to reconsider your thought and see it as a welcome checks and balances which are built in the constitution and which have started playing out in the political domain itself.
Absolutely, sir. I take your point. From NDA, I'll next come to the India bloc. A resurgence of the opposition bloc, which is a bigger news than BJP finishing below 250 mark for me or for many others in the country who believe in a strong opposition. So, how do you see India alliance getting about 230 seats in this election? How do you explain this? What does it mean for India for democracy?
Look, the performance of opposition alliance has to be seen not merely in terms of numbers, but in the context. And the context is a situation where before the elections and during the elections, raids were being conducted on their leaders. You read ED in the newspaper and you knew that some opposition leader's name would follow after that. It is in the context where two chief ministers were put in jail, in the context where the largest opposition party's bank accounts were being frozen, 30-year-old IT cases were being reopened, where the candidates were being made to withdraw. What happened in Surat and Indore are extraordinary story. These things happen in panchayat elections. They never happen in parliamentary elections. And in the context of all this, where the prime minister goes about giving the kind of speeches that no law, forget the model code of conduct, criminal law of this country does not allow such things to be said. All this was happening. And not to forget the fact that in terms of money and in terms of media power, BJP was unrivaled. The opposition was nowhere in both these things. In that context, if the opposition has managed to get 235 seats, morally they can claim that they have won this election. I understand that. However, I would argue against complacency. I would argue that opposition could have achieved much more than they have achieved. If the opposition, when the India bloc was formed, and that was a very unsettling moment for the BJP, opposition could have made much more of India coalition, its unity. They could have, to my mind, come out with the agenda for the country, some promises. Congress made 5 promises, but I would have liked to see India coalition make some promises that I think would have certainly helped. The seat negotiations, which were delayed till the last and contributed to some very bad press for the opposition. The press was always there to look for things which could be reported against opposition. That did not help them very much. And in terms of the kind of synergy that you saw, for example, in Uttar Pradesh in the last 2 or 3 phases, I would have liked to see that right from the beginning in all the states. If we had seen things of that kind, we may have been looking at a situation where the India coalition itself would be somewhere close to 270. So, in that sense, I think there's a long way to go. Congress party itself has made up a lot of ground from 52 to 99. It's not a small difference. Uh, what the Congress has achieved is instead of trying to mimic the BJP, they have stuck to their basic secular line. And for that, credit must be given to Rahul Gandhi. At a moment after 2022, where everyone said that, look, Hindutva now is the only spectrum on which you have to play. He refused to do that. That's a great thing. Bharat Jodo Yatra uh, instilled that confidence that there was a hope in this country. And the second yatra, Bharat Jodo Nyaya Yatra, what it did was that it oriented the Congress towards its own classic vote base, namely the bottom of the pyramid, poor, minorities, Dalits, Adivasis, BCs, basically anyone who's marginalized. Congress has been a party of them. And Rahul Gandhi firmly reoriented the Congress towards that. I do not think the Congress has reaped all the benefits of these changes. As yet, we have seen only the beginning of change. But my own sense is that if Congress stays firm on these two things, and if the India coalitions can hold on and sustain its political coalition for the next 4 or 5 years, we would see much, much bigger changes in the country, which are overdue anyway.
Okay, so my next question would be, you mentioned Rahul Gandhi. I wanted to ask you about Rahul Gandhi. Rahul Gandhi and Congress in particular. We know that from July 2023 till the elections 2024, we saw opposition somehow managed to put up a united face, and they managed to kind of reduce BJP's numbers and increase their numbers. But what next after the 2024 elections? we have many important elections like in Maharashtra state elections, I mean, coming up. We have other state elections coming up. Do you see India alliance sticking together like it did in 2024 elections?
There's an electoral challenge and there's a challenge beyond elections. In terms of electoral challenge, you're absolutely right. You have Maharashtra election, Jharkhand election, Haryana election. And these are both opportunities and challenges for the opposition to hold on to their existing coalition, to defeat the BJP, because going by the results of yesterday's election, BJP can be defeated in all these three elections, which are coming in the next 3-4 months. Then you have Bihar and Delhi, where again BJP can be defeated. So yes, there is the electoral challenge. There is a political challenge of holding on to this coalition, which has seen its tensions. And a lot more work needs to be done to make this into a more cohesive coalition than it has been so far. But above all, it is not only electoral and political in a narrow sense. The real challenge is to build a new social bloc for the opposition. India coalition has to align itself with the bottom of the pyramid, which is where its strength is. BJP has effectively aligned the upper half of the pyramid with itself, although BJP uses all those big words like nationalism, unity, everyone is there, no caste creed, etc. But the simple fact is that the upper caste of this country, the upper classes of this country, are very firmly aligned with the BJP. If one party has strong caste vote bank, it is the BJP which has the strongest caste vote bank. Plus, they have managed to take slices out of the lower half of the pyramid. The real challenge for the opposition is to build a new politics of the bottom of the pyramid by consolidating the caste class basis, by connecting it to issues which are the issues of the poor and the disadvantaged, by ensuring that their governments deliver something to this section so that they become credible spokespersons for this section of society. That's a real challenge. That's the long term challenge to which the India coalition must address itself to, and in which Congress has to take the lead, because Congress is the only party among the opposition which has a national footprint and something of a larger national vision.
So my another question is about, the most important aspect of this election is the voters. If I quote a headline in one of the newspapers today, it said voters gave, NDA third term and Modi a message. We look at UP, what has happened in UP, which was, kind of expected to be a bellwether state, but Samajwadi Party and the Congress have done pretty well there. And you have traveled in UP. You said in your predictions that there's an undercurrent in UP against the ruling dispensation. So my question is, I'll come to the point. Why did these results come? Why did people kind of reject BJP and almost chose India Alliance this time?
This, as you know, happened only in limited geographies. This happened in Uttar Pradesh, this happened in Haryana, this happened in Bengal, not everywhere else. But the interesting thing is that if you focus not on seats, because seats are the most visible things that we see, but if you look at the underlying trend in terms of votes, you would see that in the entire region, except the coastal belt from Kerala to Odisha, if you forget that coastal belt, in the rest of the country, there is a consistent decline of vote share for the BJP, almost in the entire region. And that is, to my mind, because politics of keeping the country in some kind of a frenzy. First, in 2014, it was a frenzy of hope. In 2019, it was kind of a nationalist frenzy about national security and so on. I think what has happened is that people are just tired of being in that very abnormal state all the time. They just come back to normal politics, normal issues. They're demanding accountability and they're not getting many answers. So BJP, when it faces the test of normal everyday issues, livelihood issues, inflation, unemployment, security, farmers' difficulties, Faced with all these challenges, BJP doesn't have very much to offer. That to me is the biggest reason. Second is the fact that there has been enormous anti-incumbency against BJP's leaders, specifically their incumbent members of parliament. And third is specific unease that sections of societies have. Dalits and some other citizens felt that constitution may be taken away. Uh, Muslims felt that their citizenship may be degraded. And many people felt that this was the beginning of dictatorship. Tanashahi is a word I heard. These things came together to affect the kind of change. And I really hope the BJP gets the message that this is not on, that you cannot keep the country in that artificial state of anxiety all the time, that Hindu Muslim polarity doesn't work all the time, that you cannot ignore everyday issues. And mind you, wherever the BJP has succeeded, it has succeeded by paying attention to everyday issues of governance. So that to me is the real message.
Okay, my last question before I know you have to go. My last question would be, now the results are out, and Mr. Modi is again, as I said, is about to be, sworn in as the as the prime minister, third record time. But we will have issues within the NDA only, like we have some sensitive issues like UCC. We have issues like one nation, one election things coming up in maybe coming up. So how do you see, where do we go from here in terms of the government formation?
Well, if there are issues, I think we should welcome them. That's very good news that there would be issues because BJP and Mr. Modi in particular is used to steamrolling everything. If there are issues, if the allies say, sorry, this is not done, and if the presence of allies emboldens some sections within the BJP to raise questions, that is indeed good news for the country. If all these major decisions are made to go through political filter, that indeed is what should happen because steamrolling all the issues that you mentioned, one nation, one election, is not simply a change in calendar of elections. It is a change in the constitutional structure. Therefore, these things must go through very careful process. Delimitation of constituencies must go through a very deep political debate in this country. So we can only be thankful that there would be issues. The more issues, the better it is for the country.
Thank you so much, Yogendra ji. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate your time and we'll keep in touch. And we thank you so much.